true. I think that's a really good way to look at it. It's, weird, separate but equal. Maybe not so necessarily, but I think, and again, this is a personal idea, but I feel like DC and Marvel both will take their chances on certain things, whether it's altering a character or a storyline here or there. I feel like percentage-wise, maybe ratio-wise or whatever, DC makes worse decisions than Marvel, or maybe ones that don't necessarily last as long. For example, Marvel brought back Bucky Barnes and created Winter Soldier, and that's awesome. We have a movie that's amazing based on that. The books that get written, especially what Ed Brubaker wrote about Bucky and for Bucky, was awesome, and the stuff that they're still doing is still pretty cool. On the flip side, DC just recently killed Dick Grayson, and now he has his own super spy title, and I could not be less interested in reading anything about that. And they'll do that, they'll try to alter characters, and it sometimes just doesn't work. But Marvel has a better track record of doing that. Even if they do go back to the status quo, like ultimately Sam Wilson will probably go back to being Falcon, or what would be cooler is if they made Sam Wilson like U.S. agent or something, but Steve Rogers will ultimately be Captain America at some point again. But what they do with those characters is cooler, or just maybe more meaningful or something. It's a lot less that was a bad idea, as opposed to, it was a good idea for the time. Like Bucky was Cap, Sam's Cap, and then they just.
I think to Mac's point, the DC argument would be, we swing for the fences every single time, and when it works, it's awesome, but and we'll keep swinging like that. We're not gonna, and when we miss, it's gonna be a big whiff. But, throw another pitch and we're going to swing just as hard. And, maybe 1 out of 5 gets knocked out of the park, and, the other ones are big misses, whatever. I think Marvel tends to, play small ball a little bit more, play it a little bit safer. We'll bring it back. We're not going to swing at something that doesn't look just right.
Or, my thought on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say, my thought with what Nick is saying is, with Marvel, if you're saying Marvel does it better, I think it's because Marvel does it more. Back to my original point. DC misses a lot of opportunities because they're not doing what, say, the readers are going, come on, do this. Put Dick Grayson back as Nightwing. Nobody asked him to be this stupid agent guy.
Yeah.
And so when they do those decisions, it's not as frequent as Marvel. Marvel, like I said, goes, we're trying everything. And so when it does hit, they look like geniuses. But there's for every one, there might be 4 ideas that we're just going to cancel that title now and focus on this great one that we came up with. Yeah. Same thing with when they create more additional characters. Mm-hmm. Cheek, I think, said that. That was a great point. They do, for the most part, because they're constantly doing it, whereas DC, who was the last character in the last 20 years that has stuck around? Bane?
Damian Wayne?
That's it. Damian Wayne, good point. It's very, we'll see who else sticks around.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Nick, you were saying.
Yeah, no, the thing is, and the reason we're having this conversation is because both of you know a lot more about the DC lore and continuity than I do. I'm just going by what I know of DC versus the pantheon of stuff that I know about Marvel. But yeah, it just seems like in terms of storytelling, with the characters that DC actually cares about, they have the upper hand. They typically do it better, and like Cheek said, they swing for the fences, and that's awesome, and that has its merits. Marvel will play it a little bit safer, but they do have this tendency to pull really good creators who will come up with good characters that do stick around. And maybe, the only awesome thing they have is their first story arc, or just mishmash of story arcs, and then they might peter out, but the character and the concept is so cool that it lives on a lot longer. And I feel like that's probably Marvel's strength over DC, is their ability to create and build characters, and put them in the places that they need to be, which is why, like you were saying before, there's all these different Avengers books and team books or whatever, and they do that all the time. They just they'll create a team book because it's like, these characters are popular, let's have them work together, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and they're always shaking it up, and I think that has its merits as well, because and this actually will be a point that I meant to bring up. I feel like Marvel has, as crazy as this might sound, has a better handle on their continuity and character interaction than DC does, because as much as I love reading the 5 Batman related titles that I read a month, and especially Batman Eternal, which is every week, I have no idea how they interconnect, and if they ever do reference each other, it's like a one-off line in one panel that's like, hey, that thing just happened, and that was it, and they hardly intersect well, I guess. It's probably not till much afterwards, when you look back and the titles are collected, that you could go, okay, maybe it goes here, and here. Marvel's, they're really big on going, this is happening here, and here, and their title page explains that, this happens before this, book or whatever, and they're really big on that, and I like that. They're cohesive in that way, and that's probably why I prefer Marvel over DC, at least a little bit. So I think that would be one of my biggest differences.
I agree with that. However, for me, and from what I hear from others too, that could also be a problem with Marvel, because especially in the last 5 to 10 years, Marvel's done a lot of events. We can even use Civil War, since I brought it up, as here's your main book, or Secret War, with the Skrulls, the Secret Invasion. That was a great example of, here's the main book, but if you really want the story, you have to buy these 5 other titles that you weren't planning on reading to get the whole, which, if you're already reading those titles, it's incredible, it's great. But the downfall is, I want to be buying those other freaking titles I wasn't reading to begin with.
Right.
But I do like that first page idea of, in case you missed it, here's what you need to know. I wish DC did that.
Yeah, it would be helpful, and I don't know why, unless it's like a sales technique, here's Batman issue 30. If you want to know what happened, you got to pick up 29 more issues. I don't know if it's that, or if they just don't want to do something that Marvel does or whatever. But it's objectively, you can put them side by side and see the big differences, which is a lot of which I think we covered pretty well in this talk. But that's why I asked just specifically about differences and not necessarily about which is better. I know we all kind of interjected, and you could probably infer from what we said which we prefer, think is better, but that's apples and oranges.
Another point is a pretty big one. I hear and read a lot about is, I think Marvel does a better job of engaging females, the female fan base, and reaching out to different minorities who maybe traditionally aren't really big on comics. And I think DC struggles with that. I mean, I think DC has it's definitely a very big white boys club, and I think there are definitely there's websites like DC Women Kicking Ass, like where there's this ravenous fan base that is just begging for some strong female heroes that actually wear clothes that they can get behind. And I think Marvel has them in spades. And I think Marvel's like, cool, you're a girl, you want to read comic books about, strong women who aren't treated like, sex dolls. We got that. And I think DC is kind of like, we kind of like, having a slutty Catwoman and, a naked Wonder Woman. So,
our girl.
You know what? I don't know if it's necessarily a matter of they like it or they have no idea how to change it or do something different with it, because like you said earlier on, what they lean on is the Justice League, and that's it. And if they go too far in any direction with any of those characters to make them unrecognizable, the whole universe that they have, it might just crumble. Like, you'll never see a black Batman. You have Batwing, but Batman as a character, the most he was ever going to be is Dick Grayson, but he'll always be Bruce Wayne. But you're not going to get the same kind of like, well, Captain America is multiple different characters now with DC, and it's hard to say that there's something wrong with that, right? Like, I don't want to be a revisionist history person, and maybe DC is just a company that will lean on those handful of really strong characters for the rest of their existence and do fine and just tell these stories with these classic characters that they've built, and that's it, and that is what they'll be. That's what it is. But having diversity in comics, especially because there's such a diverse population in this country and across the world, the thing that Marvel's doing with, building all these characters that are really awesome to be representative of the population of the world, let alone the U.S., is awesome as well. So it's hard to say, because I wouldn't want to do it just on DC's part. I wouldn't want them to like do stuff just to do it. I would want it to make sense. And like I've said before, I think Marvel has a better handle on that, making stuff make sense when they want to make a change. But I guess we'll see. But that's a really good point. They have way less diversity than Marvel does. Or than DC.
I do think, though, just to defend DC, and I agree with that, but I am starting to see some effort being made. Batgirl has been, and I'm reading it since they got a new writer and the outfit changed. I like the art style, but that's more hip. As of today, the Batgirl's checking her tweets, while she's sitting on a rooftop. So they're trying to make that more girl-friendly, and they have Gotham Academy, which, from what I understand, I have yet to read it. But that's in that vein. So, here's hoping. I hope it gets better.
See, that's the thing that I'll accuse DC of too, and I've only noticed from the few titles that I read, is when they try to be like with it, things like
of the time
they almost go a little bit too overboard. Where like Marvel has integrated just like the times well, as they've gone along. Like, Spider-Man tends to like reference trendy things if like over the past decade at least. I mean, it's probably for a lot longer than that, but from what I've been reading, where he'll just like, it'll be an off-the-cuff remark about YouTube or Twitter or Facebook or something like that, or a pop culture reference or whatever. But it's never like, hey, we're saying this pop culture thing that you guys know, right? We're with it. Like, but DC will do that. It's kind of like, DC's like the grandpa who's on Facebook. Like, hey, see, I'm here. I know what's up.
Yeah, if I am.
And then, again, it's not, I don't mean that to be like picking on them, because I love DC too, but they will. They'll just overboard it, and to the point where you just go, maybe you just shouldn't have. I've
seen both cases where, it looks okay now, but if I go back and read an issue where they're talking about MySpace, like, oh, now you're dated. Now you made I hear about like Mitt Romney. Like, no, it doesn't. You're no.
Yeah, but that's the case for both companies forever, right? I mean,
yeah.
Batman comics from the 19 whatever, like his first decade, you've got mobsters with fedoras and revolvers going copper, and he's like, it's bad.
Wish we still had that.
And what's that?
I wish we still had that. I mean, more people should wear fedoras.
Oh, well, I agree, but
yeah.
So yeah, all books are of their time, so that's it's gonna happen. It's just an inevitability. When DC does want to date themselves in a book, I feel like it's very in your face more often than not.
I'd be curious to see if you ever find some examples.
Maybe it's because they don't normally do it. Well, like you just said with Batgirl, she's checking her tweets, and it's like, I don't know. Batman, I tend to never see, like, he doesn't reference stuff because he's never, he's too busy to reference pop culture and stuff like that. So what you do get is you get a really good crime book that more often than not doesn't date itself outside of like clothing and hairstyles and stuff like that, or maybe the art style as well. But because it's not often that they do it, when it happens, it feels out of place. Maybe that's the issue that I might have, but yeah, because Marvel will reference the times a lot more frequently. So it never feels like it's out of place, I guess. That might be the issue that I'm having.
Right.
So,
all right.
Well, unless you guys have anything more to say, we actually went really long with this episode. So, if you guys are good, we'll move on for today. You good?
All right. Well, thanks, everybody.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next episode. Thanks for watching.